You're standing at the edge of a clearing. Your hands are shaking, not from fear, from the weight of what you're carrying. A long wooden shaft, perfectly balanced, with a stone tip hafted tightly in place with pine resin and animal sinew. Behind you, your group watches in silence. In front of you, a woolly rhinoceros grazes without knowing you're there. This is not a fair fight, and never was. But the outcome, who wins, who eats, who lives to see another winter, was decided long before this moment. It was decided 3 days ago, when your ancestors sat beside a fire and began to carve. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors faced predators, prey, and rivals with nothing but the materials the earth provided. No metal, no gunpowder, no factories. And yet the weapons they invented were so sophisticated, so precisely engineered, that modern researchers are still stunned by them today. These aren't crude clubs and sharpened sticks. These are aerodynamic, chemically enhanced, psychologically calculated. And some of them are things your brain probably never pictured. Let's start at the beginning. The oldest confirmed throwing spears ever found were discovered in a coal mine near Schöningen, Germany in the mid-1990s. Archaeologist Hartmut Thieme and his team pulled 8 wooden spears from sediment layers dating to roughly 300,000 years ago. They weren't rough-cut branches. They were shaped like modern javelins, heaviest and thickest near the front, tapering to a point, balanced for maximum range and accuracy. One of them is nearly 2.5 meters long. Thieme himself described them as the earliest complete hunting weapons ever found for any species. Think about what that means. Your ancestors weren't just grabbing sticks and throwing them at animals. They were engineering flight dynamics. They understood, without words for it, that a spear flies straighter when the weight sits near the tip. They were applying physics 300,000 years before physics had a name. But the spear was only the beginning. The next leap was the stone tip, and it came much earlier than anyone expected. In 2012, paleoanthropologist Jane Wilkins and her team published a paper in the journal Science about a site in South Africa called Kathupan 1. What they found there pushed the date of stone-tipped spears back by more than 200,000 years. The tips at Kathupan 1, sharpened, carefully flaked stones designed to be hafted onto wooden shafts, were dated to roughly 500,000 years ago, 500,000 years. That means your ancestors were engineering composite weapons, tools made from 2 or more materials joined together long before Homo sapiens even existed. Your ancestors may not have been Homo sapiens at all. They may have been Homo heidelbergensis, an earlier species now extinct who shared your lineage. And they were already making tools that required planning, sourcing materials from different locations, and mastering chemical adhesives. Because here is where it gets strange. To attach a stone tip to a wooden shaft, ancient humans didn't just tie it on. They made glue. Archaeologists have found evidence at multiple African sites of a compound adhesive made from ochre, a red iron-rich mineral, mixed with plant gum or acacia resin and animal fat. The result was a natural cement, heat-stable and water-resistant. They were cooking chemistry in fireside workshops. They were manufacturing. Researcher Francesco De Erico, who has studied the materials found at Blombos Cave on the southern coast of South Africa, describes these sites as some of the earliest evidence of systematic, planned production. Not improvised, not accidental, deliberate. So your ancestors had aerodynamic wooden shafts, stone tips, natural adhesive, but they weren't done yet. They needed range. Enter the atlatl. The word comes from the Nahuatl language of the Aztecs, but the device itself is far, far older. An atlatl is a wooden or bone arm extension, typically 30 to 60 centimeters long, with a hooked end that cradles the back of a spear. When you throw with an atlatl, you don't just throw with your arm. You throw with a mechanical advantage that effectively doubles the length of your throwing arm in an instant. The result is staggering. A spear thrown by hand might travel 30 meters with enough force to penetrate a target. A spear launched with an atlatl can reach 100 meters or more, with nearly 3 times the kinetic energy. It transforms a close-quarters weapon into something approaching a sniper's tool. Researcher John Shea of Stony Brook University has spent decades studying early projectile technology, and his work draws a sharp distinction between weapons thrown at close range, which require strength and courage, and weapons delivered from a distance, which require planning, positioning, and patience. The shift from one to the other, Shea argues, was one of the most significant changes in human behavioral evolution. It meant your ancestors could kill from outside the danger zone. It meant you could be smart instead of brave. But the weapons didn't stop there. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, one of the most important archaeological sites in the world for understanding human origins, researchers have found round stone balls that date back more than 1 million years. These are called bola stones. They weren't thrown alone. They were tied together in groups of 2 or 3 with cords of plant fiber or twisted animal hide, and hurled at the legs of running prey. When the cord wraps around the animal's legs, the stones spin and tangle, bringing the animal down without the hunter needing to get close. Think about the intelligence required for that. You need to understand momentum. You need to understand geometry. You need to understand animal locomotion well enough to aim for the legs at full run. And you need to manufacture cords strong enough to survive the impact, 1 million years ago. Then there's the blade. Obsidian, volcanic glass, was one of the most prized materials in the ancient world, and for good reason. When fractured correctly, obsidian produces an edge at the molecular level, thinner than a human hair, finer than a modern surgical scalpel. Researchers who have tested obsidian blades against steel scalpels in controlled settings have found that obsidian cuts cleaner through soft tissue. Ancient humans who had access to obsidian sources traveled significant distances to obtain it. Archaeological evidence shows obsidian being traded across hundreds of kilometers in the ancient world. It was so valuable and so lethal that it became not just a weapon, but a form of social currency. Your ancestors weren't just making weapons, they were building economies around them. Now, here is the one that changes everything. The deadliest weapon your ancestors ever had wasn't held in their hand, it was held in their mind. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer groups, from Richard Lee's foundational research with the Kung San people of the Kalahari in the 1960s to James Sussman's more recent fieldwork, consistently find that the most effective hunters aren't the strongest or the fastest. They're the ones who remember the most, who know where the water is in a drought year, who know which plant neutralizes which toxin, who remember the herd's migration patterns from 5 seasons before. Knowledge was the weapon. Everything else was just a delivery system. Which means that right now, in this moment, you carry 300,000 years of accumulated weapons technology inside you, not in your hands, in your brain. The same brain that engineered aerodynamic spears, the same brain that discovered molecular edge blades, the same brain that turned a berry into a killing agent and called it hunting. You're standing at the edge of everything your ancestors built, and the most dangerous weapon they ever made, you're using it right now, reading these words.